at Raw. Seems like Maurice is really holding him back, and hopefully around the time that you hear this audio commentary, Maurice and Ted DiBiase will have gone their separate ways, and this push that's been reported for Ted DiBiase on ProWrestling.com and PW Insider and a number of different other sources will come into fruition, because I really think someone like Maurice is really holding Ted DiBiase back. But I'm really, surprised that Ted DiBiase hasn't had his push followed through with, because he's such a phenomenal wrestler. In the early stages of his career, as I said before at the top of the show, second-generation superstars seem to be getting more opportunities than they had been given in recent years by WWE Creative, and WWE Creative have a tremendous amount of faith in people like Ted DiBiase, Cody Rhodes, and so on, and of course Alberto Del Rio, who has a tremendous amount of hype and faith put in him and instilled in him by Vince McMahon and members of the WWE Creative team. But I really hope that when Vader's son has the opportunity to premiere in WWE on NXT or on a Raw or a SmackDown, I really hope that WWE makes the most of utilizing his character. Now, I remember reading a report on WWE.com and ProWrestling.com and PW Insider and a number of other sources that Sid Eady, better known as Sid Vicious and Psycho Sid for his time spent in WWF and WCW, his son was supposed to have a WWE tryout and have the opportunity to compete for WWE on Raw, SmackDown, or NXT, whatever. That was before NXT was ever put into fruition last year in the month of February for WWE, and Sid's son never did have the opportunity to work for WWE, and we never did see him premiere on Raw or SmackDown. So hopefully Vader's son's story will be somewhat different, and we will actually have the opportunity to see him work against some of WWE's top talents. If you ask my personal opinion on Vader's son, Vader, of course, is a legend. He's known the world throughout. He's had the opportunity to compete in virtually every place in the world, even Japan, Tokyo, Germany, Brazil, wherever. Vader has had the opportunity to compete, and he's had the opportunity to wrestle against some of professional wrestling's biggest names. He holds victories over The Undertaker. He holds victories over people like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. He holds at least one victory over every huge name that this business has produced over the last 25 or 30 years. So I really don't think that Vader's son is going to need a show like NXT to get him over and to introduce himself into the field of the competitors that WWE have right now. I don't really think that Vader's son is going to need NXT to catapult him onto a Raw or a SmackDown position, simply because Vader has wrestled throughout the world. He's been on virtually every type of tour that WWE and WCW have put together, and had the opportunity to compete in places like Brazil and Germany, Tokyo and Japan, and even now that he's doing stuff at seminars and being on the independents, he's still having the opportunity to compete in Japan and Tokyo and places like that. So that gives you an idea of how big of a name Vader really is 25 or 30 years later into his prestigious wrestling career. So I really don't think that Vader's son is really going to need the opportunity to be on NXT. I think that immediately what they should do is just introduce him as part of Raw or SmackDown and introduce him into the young crop of WWE talents that way, because NXT is not needed in some scenarios of WWE, and I really don't think that NXT is really going to do Vader's son any amount of justice. I think that he would be a tremendous heel on a Raw or SmackDown and have the opportunity to compete, or at least should be given the opportunity to compete against some of WWE's biggest names. I'd love to see him compete against somebody like Triple H. I'd love to see him compete against somebody like John Cena or Batista or somebody along those lines, because I really think that his father has really paved the way for people like Ted DiBiase, Cody Rhodes, Alberto Del Rio, and so on. If it wasn't for people like Vader, who made professional wrestling such a huge thing and a huge topic back in the 90s, I really don't think we would see superstars like Alberto Del Rio and Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase and so on produced. People like that probably would have never been heard of or have even been given the chance to compete for companies like WWE and WCW. So I really think that Vader really had the opportunity to, pave the way for young talents that we're seeing now, the sons of of Ted DiBiase, and of course the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Of course, TNA Wrestling wouldn't have a tremendous amount of young talent if it wasn't people like Vader and Dusty Rhodes and Ted DiBiase and the premier generation, I should say, of WWE superstars. So I think that people like Vader's son should be very grateful for having the opportunity to at least have a tryout for WWE. There was one scenario that was pitched to me here on the radio program a few years ago, and it was when I had the opportunity to interview Henry Godwinn, and he was so happy that his son was going to be given the opportunity to work as part of WWE on the NXT brand, and then later had the opportunity to compete on Raw or SmackDown. Henry Godwinn's son has yet to show up on WWE programming, as well as Sid's son does. So there are several superstars who don't have the opportunity, who are, considered by WWE, you should say, but never do have the opportunity to compete inside of a WWE ring. So if Vader's son is given the opportunity to work for WWE, I can only hope that he makes the most of his opportunity that's going to be given to him and presented to him, and definitely runs with the ball and sticks around with WWE and is able to maintain a contract with them for 5 or 10 years. I think that if you have competed for any major company like WWE and TNA, like John Cena and Randy Orton have, for over 10 years, I really think that you have done a lot and contributed a lot to the business. Now, there are people who stay in wrestling 10 or 15 years and never have the opportunity to be the WWE or TNA champion, and they really don't make the most of, the 10 years that they've been given in the business. And there are a lot of prime examples that I could, center this around and circle around, but I really don't feel the need to do so, because there are people who stay in this business 10 or 15 years just for the sake of being there and to let people know that they're still a part of the business and they're not going anywhere. But there are people like John Cena and Randy Orton who have made the most of their opportunities in the business, and I really hope that if Vader's son sticks around for 10 or 15 years, he definitely makes the most of his opportunity, because he could be in main events against people like Triple H. He could be in main events against people like The Undertaker, and he could even surpass the career of his father, Vader, who is known throughout the world for competing in almost every major promotion that there is to have competed in the last 25 or 30 years. And what I have a tremendous amount of respect for are the legends who still have these wrestling schools, like Harley Race, who Vader spent a tremendous amount of his time with in WCW. There are people who still have these wrestling schools, like Vader, who just recently opened up his own wrestling school. There are people like Chris Hamrick who are trying to get their wrestling schools off the ground. There are people who still have a tremendous amount of passion for this business, and they stay in it 25 or 30 years, and they simply feel the need to go nowhere. And I really hope that Vader's son definitely makes the most of his opportunity, because his father, as I said before, previously in this audio commentary, definitely paved the way for all of the young second and third generation superstars such as Randy Orton, John Cena, Ted DiBiase, Cody Rhodes, and Alberto Del Rio, and Carlito even, the son of Carlos Colon, who still is in this business. They really did a lot to pave the way for these young superstars, and Vader is definitely a tremendous example of that. And I really hope that Vader's son makes his father proud, because I really think that Vader is really excited about this opportunity. And as I said before, there are a lot of sons of professional wrestling, second and third generation superstars, who are never even considered and never have the opportunity to compete inside of a WWE ring, like Lacey Von Erich. I know she's a knockout in TNA, a former knockout of TNA. Her father, Kerry Von Erich, was a tremendous superstar for WWE in the 80s and 90s, but never before has she had the opportunity to compete for WWE. We only saw her, the majority of her, on the independents and inside of a TNA ring as part of the Beautiful People for the short time she was there. Some of these superstars come through the doors, they're there 5 or 6 months, and they're never heard of again. And I really hope that with these opportunities coming far and few between, I really hope that Vader's son definitely makes the most of the opportunity he's presented with, and has the becomes a future Intercontinental Champion or becomes a future World Champion, because he definitely could make the most of his opportunity, and he could even surpass the career of Vader. If Randy Orton's son, or if Bob Orton's son, if Bob Orton's son Randy Orton can surpass his career and go on to become a 5-time WWE champion or a world champion or an Intercontinental champion, I think that Vader's son could definitely go on to surpass his career. And I really think that, these young superstars, some of them don't make the most of their opportunities, and some of them do. Randy Orton and John Cena, as I said. John Cena's father, Johnny Fabulous, has got to be very proud of his son. Randy Orton and John Cena definitely have made the most of their opportunities, and several other superstars have made the most of their opportunities and made their fathers very proud. I know Ted DiBiase, from personally speaking to him here on this broadcast, is very son of the success of his son Ted DiBiase Jr. So I really hope that Vader's son definitely makes the most of his opportunity, and if he does show up in WWE, makes his father proud, because there are a lot of people in this business like D.H. Smith, whose father is not even here anymore because of his personal demons that he battled for many years, the British Bulldog, who competed in many main events for WWE, competed in one of the most legendary Intercontinental Championship matches with Bret the Hitman Hart in front of over 92,000 fans in Wembley Stadium. So I really hope that people like Vader's son really make the most of these opportunities, because they are far and few between. And it was a very interesting story that I read on ProWrestling.com and PW Insider and a number of other sources that I felt the need to make reference to, simply because it was a very interesting story to me. So I really hope that Vader's son definitely makes the most of his opportunity that he's been given. You can find the article by going to ProWrestling.com, and only time will tell. I've always said this about opportunities in the wrestling business and the wrestling business in general. Time is the most precious commodity, and you have to make the most of the time you've been given. And I can only hope that Vader's son makes the most of this opportunity and eventually lands a contract with WWE on either Raw or SmackDown, or even if he has to, be on Tough Enough for NXT, whatever. Just I